We're sitting here with one of the directors of Avengers Endgame, Anthony Russo, and one of the stars of Avengers Endgame, Joe Russo. What's going on, guys? Thanks so much for being here.
Love being here. Thank you.
Listen, if there's anyone out there that hasn't seen the movie yet, we are going to get into spoiler territory. I don't know if there is anyone out there that hasn't seen this film yet, but just warning you, spoilers could be coming along the discussion. First off, Joe, congratulations. You didn't end up on the cutting room floor this time like the last.
No, usually my cameos are the first to go when we're trying to cut down the time, but it was just, it was an integral scene to sort of show how the world was reacting to, what had happened at the end of Infinity War, and so I sneakily put myself in that scene, knowing that we couldn't cut it. So, is this the first openly gay character in the MCU? Yes, openly gay character. Yeah. Yes. There's been insinuations about other characters' sexuality, but this is first openly gay.
Who else is gay?
We're going to find out.
Yeah, that's a story for another day.
That is. And, there is a gay character coming up in one of their films. I think Kevin will make that announcement, I'm sure, pretty soon.
How much were you guys watching the box office receipts and the reviews, which have been remarkable? And how much do you guys pay attention to that over the past 2 weeks?
We hear about it the way that everyone else hears about it, but
we try to cue most.
Yes.
I mean, look,
exactly.
It becomes it's funny because when you don't want to spoil the film and there's a restriction on spoilers, the conversation tends to become more about box office and talking around the movie than rather talking right at the movie. But yeah, I mean, Joe and I love fan reaction. That's what we try to get to most. And we just look at box office or even reviews as just a sort of a signifier of how the movie's being received by audiences. And we make these movies for the fans. I mean, you can see when you're in the movie theater, there's a special energy that's happening in those theaters that is really hard to find. And that's we've snuck into quite a few theaters since the movie's open to experience that.
I wanted to ask you that because the person to my right had a box of tissues when I saw it, and this is like the first day it was open at 10 a.m. and the person to my left was standing up and sitting down the entire time, he was musical chairs because he was so excited about different things, and it was such a funny experience to watch it like that. What was the first weekend the movie opened? Did you go and watch it?
We did. We went to a show in Westwood at the Village Theater. I think it was a 6 or 8 p.m. show. One of the first show on that Thursday. And it was like a rock concert. I mean, it was crazy. And we snuck in after the lights went down, and we're sort of hiding in the back of the theater. It was amazing. And as a filmmaker, that is a very special experience when people are responding to the material that way.
What played the best in the screening that you saw? And was it something that you anticipated, or was there another moment that you were like, oh, I can't believe that's the moment that people went crazy
I think we
for?
could anticipate this one. It was when Cap caught the hammer. I mean, they went bananas.
But still, we didn't anticipate the sort of the intensity of it.
People were jumping out of their seats, maybe running in the
for us.
aisles. It was nuts. And then and then he fights Thanos with it for a good 30 seconds, and every hit was another cheer. And it's just exciting that people are that passionate and that invested in these characters.
My favorite moment though was the kid in front of me when the portals appear and it's clear that T'Challa is walking through. The kid in front of me goes, "Yes, on your effing left." I particularly like that one.
Let's talk a little more, again, spoiler territory here, people. Let's talk a little more about Captain America, because the way you guys end, not just this film, but these 22 films with this moment, so powerful, so smart, so emotional. And I was wondering what that was like for you guys, because you guys came into this franchise through Captain America as well. That's how you guys started coming in through those films. What was it like, and did it have a special, just seeing Cap off like that? How did that feel for you guys?
Well, it was great because we're able to tell a complete story over the 4 films that we've done for Marvel. A thematic story, a literal narrative story. And, Cap is an interesting character who, went from a character who wanted to serve to self-actualization by the end of the, series for him. Made an individual choice, to be with Peggy, and that's an interesting arc, And Tony's arc, he went. If you go back and look at Iron Man in that first 10 minutes, he's an egoist. He's selfish, and by the end of the series, he's selfless. So I think they both had very interesting inverted arcs, and they're sort of, passing each other along the way.
But for us, it's funny. A lot of our journey with Cap has been, because the character started off as such a strong, resolute, morally focused character. We like to find vulnerabilities in characters. We like to challenge characters as much as possible. So it's like our job with Cap, a lot of times as we sort of spin the narrative, is like, how do we break Cap? So we've spent now several movies just trying to break Cap, and I'm glad that we couldn't.
I loved how it ended, but it left me with questions. So as with so many people, and it was making my brain hurt a little bit. At a certain point, I'm like, I'm just gonna talk to these guys.
Yeah.
He's in an alternate reality, so this is not like a Ray Bradbury situation.
So what happens is we're playing with a different form of time travel. It's the multiverse notion of time travel. We didn't want to play by the Back to the Future rules. We wanted to do something different. And of course, you talk to physicists. There's 10 different theories about what time travel could be. But by the way, here's the great news about time travel. It doesn't exist. So you can do whatever you want.
And yet you guys did talk to physicists, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
we did, just to get ideas.
And no matter who's trying to explain time travel to you, at some point it makes no sense.
But the Hulk tells you in the film, he says, you cannot affect the present by going to the past, because the present has always happened. So if you go to the past, the only thing you can do is create an alternate future, right? That's what Cap does. Is there's an alternate future that happens. So he would live out that life with Peggy in an alternate future, and he would have to then get back to this timeline to hand off that shield. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but does that mean that there's another world where we're going to see Chris Evans as Cap again?
I think Evans is done with the character. I think it's been a long road for him. And I think that's Cap's story. It was a nice story, but you can imagine in your own head another Cap story that's taking place in that alternate timeline.
The big question you mentioned, handing off that shield, was, is Bucky going to get it or is Sam going to get it?
Right.
How much discussion was there amongst you all in terms of who was going to get that shield? And ultimately is Sam.
There was a lot, because again, it fueled by the books. There is two versions of who gets the shield, Sam or Bucky, and yeah, we talked about it, but it became pretty clear to us early on. Cap and Sam just share a character connection. They're both sort of like, they're very dedicated
Not that Cap
soldiers.
and Bucky don't, but yeah.
Well, I think the real attraction between Cap and Bucky is more their relationship started more as opposites. You know what I mean? That's how they complemented one another. Whereas I feel like Sam and Cap are more of kindred spirits, and also I think, which is important, Bucky has a damaged mind. I don't know if you want to give another weapon to that guy. Could end up being used the wrong way at some point.
What was it like for the actors when they read that? Because as I was watching it, I was like, oh, poor Bucky.
Yeah.
I felt bad for him.
Sebastian actually found out in that moment while we were filming him. We wanted to get a really honest performance. No, I'm just kidding.
I was like, what? I know you have stake secrecy
It sounds
to
like
the
something
extreme.
we might do, right? But we weren't that cruel. I think it just, in a certain way, it makes sense. I mean, Bucky has his arm, his bionic arm, and it sort of symbolizes who he is as a character. And we have left him in this universe. He still is, his mind is can be corrupted. So he knows that. And he knows he's a potentially dangerous person. And Sam, was had the same sort of dedication to service that Cap did, and it seems to make sense.
But I think what you're saying is that you feel bad for him. Is that that's part of? We think that's important part of the storytelling. Is that there are real stakes in the storytelling. There are real losses, and sometimes characters lose. And it's sort of, it may not be the most fun part of the story, but it helps fuel and give energy to the story overall and pleasure to the story overall, I think.
I wanted to ask you about those losses in particular. I mean, we knew there was going to be a changing of the guard and some people were going to leave. And I love that it wasn't just like, kill, kill, kill. There were some people that maybe had the end of their line in their story. And then obviously other people died. How did you kind of come to the decision of, okay, we're going to leave this person alive? Or
it was all based upon really specific thinking about each character individually. We really wanted to walk every character through their entire arc in the MCU and think about what was the most satisfying conclusion for each, because that was our job on this movie. The one thing I love about this movie compared to the other films is all the other Marvel films we've done, we've always been thinking about, well, where can the story go next? Where can the story go next? Our job in this movie was simply to provide a conclusion and an ending to the road that had been traveled up to this movie. And that was a great liberation for us. And so we really just looked at those characters and the road they traveled, and we can go through each of them. But that's how we sort of decided Cap starting from a place where all he wanted to do was serve and being ready to lay down his life. He actually, as far as he knew, he laid down his life in the first Avenger. He laid down his life again, potentially in Winter Soldier when he was trying to break through the Bucky. So Cap's a guy who's already tried to sacrifice his life. We know that about Cap, that he can he's willing to do that. So we thought the most satisfying ending for him would be to finally get his greatest loss back, to retrieve his greatest loss in that sort of missed opportunity with Peggy. Tony Stark is a very opposite arc that we were following with him, where this guy started from a very self-centered, arrogant place. And so the greatest ending for his narrative would be to reach a moment of true selflessness, right. Self-sacrifice. So he, and that's what he does there. And he had a lot to lose in that moment, but he was willing to give it up.
Tony Stark was always fated to die. He's a futurist, and he always saw on the horizon the danger that was coming. And that's why he tried to create a suit of armor around the world in Ultron. And he always said it's coming from up there. He could feel it, and he would never rest. And Pepper says this to him in the movie. Would you be able to rest, when he talks about, taking this discovery of time travel and putting it in a box and throwing it at the bottom of the lake. And she says, yeah, but could you rest? And he can't. He can't rest until the job is done, and if it requires sacrificing his life to do it. And I think people ascribe, bad energy towards dying. Yeah, it's not great to die. However, but when you do it under heroic circumstances and you do it to preserve the universe, there's something inspiring and ennobling and hopeful about that.
Was that an emotional day on set?
Without question. The last thing that we shot was Robert saying, "I am Iron Man," and snapping his fingers. And
that was a few months ago, wasn't it?
That was. We did it in January.
Yeah.
But it was. It took us a while to figure out what that line was, and that was. I think that was emotional. It's been very emotional for Robert. I mean, this is 10 years of his life, and this is the character has incredible, relevance to him. As at the time when Marvel hired him, it was hard to get Robert insured, and he's turned into perhaps the biggest star in the world, and certainly the most recognizable character in the world.
What was it that you felt like you said you took a while to figure out what the line was? Like, what was it? Did you feel like
he wasn't saying anything at one point, because we're like, oh, there's just so much pressure on a last line for a character that's this, popular. So we had him. We made it about the reveal that he got the stones from Thanos, and that he smiled and clicked his fingers.
So in the edit room one day, in the edit room one day, we're just sitting around, and our editor Jeff Ford, who's edited all 4 of our Marvel movies as well as several other Marvel films, and he is like literally one of the cornerstones of the MCU. Nobody knows it better. Just came up with this line out of nowhere, and we're like, oh my God.
Get the cameras out. We're going to shoot it tomorrow. Yeah. Call Robert.
And then Robert, like Joe was saying, it's emotionally complicated. It's a difficult thing for Robert to perform, and he was very resistant. He didn't want to come back and do it, but we have to shoot.
Well, he was getting ready for reshoots on another movie he was working on. Then he'd have to grow the goatee back, and to get back in peak shape.
Yeah.
And,
it's difficult.
And say he thought he had already said goodbye to the character, and he had to do it one more time, so we had to talk him into it.
We're talking with Joe and Anthony Russo, who somehow took one of the most anticipated movies in history and managed to exceed expectations. Were there any other moments in this film where that after you guys shot Infinity War, you made changes to Endgame? I mean, I remember seeing the goodbye between Peter and Tony, and it was kind of a mirror of what happened in Infinity War the other way. Mm-hmm. And I know that there was some... you were talking with Toby about how to film that and this and that. And I just wonder if there are any things that after Infinity War you made changes.
I can't think of anything super specific, because we had shot most of Endgame before Infinity War was released.
Right.
We did go back and do a big part of the third act, but that was already set in stone. Can you think of anything that we
We're
altered?
stones.
Yeah, that's right.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Thank you. No, I can't think of anything we really changed because the movies were really kind of conceived and sort of spun together. So they were linked. And we have like such a deep relationship with the writers Marcus and McFeely. We do work things out in a pretty solid way before we get to shooting.
And it's not a short movie. But we talked last year when you guys came in after Infinity War, and I asked you, I remember, was there anything that you just couldn't get in the film that you had to cut out? And you told us about the great scene on the Guardian's ship that couldn't make the film. Right. Was there anything in this film that
there was nothing like that?
They're just small moments, really.
It was something we were talking about last night.
There's a funny beat. I mean, like, we trim these small things. If you remember at the end of the film where Thor is saying goodbye to Valkyrie, and he's basically turning over Asgard to her. The in the endings we felt like we wanted to keep it a little tight, so we're looking for some stuff to squeeze there. And he had this beat with Valkyrie where after he sort of turns over the kingdom to her, he kind of puts his arm on her shoulder, or she puts her arm on his shoulder. And he sort of starts to lean in for a kiss, and she goes, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, I thought that the touch." She's like, "Yeah, it's like a goodbye tap I'm giving you. It's a tap." And it was a really funny beat, but we cut it.
It was cute. It was mostly improvised by the two of them. It was very funny.
He's so good. Yeah.
How thrilling was it for you to see Fat Thor?
Thrilling.
It's what's great is that we're able to have that 5-year time jump and make really extreme choices with the characters over those 5 years. How do you process your grief? And we always try to look at of course we have people in crazy costumes and hair, but we try to pull some level of psychological realism into the storytelling. And if half the universe had disappeared and it was your fault, you would process that in a very intense way.
None of that specific to Thor. I mean, nobody has suffered arguably more than Thor. I mean, if you look at his arc, it's like Shakespearean in terms of what he's
lost.
His
father,
his entire planet was
people,
destroyed.
His planet was
his
destroyed.
road with Thanos begins in Infinity War with Thanos killing his brother and Heimdall and several more people.
And then he blows it at the end of the movie, and so he's processing his guilt in an intense way. Now he's an alcoholic, and he could care less.
And it's like, where do you go with a character who's that
right?
low? Who's carrying that much pain? And sometimes the road forward from that moment is through humor, and that seemed like the right place to go with him, to move him forward, to get him past that moment. And we also think it's very real and relatable element of depression, like the way he starts to behave.
Plus, I wanted to be able to play Thor at Comic-Con and not have to worry about getting in shape to do it.
When we were trying to sell the idea of the character to other people, we actually went online and found a rotund cosplay Thor who looked amazing, and we're like, that was our picture. We'd point out, it's like, this is what we want to do with Thor.
Oh my God, can you imagine how the cosplay person would feel if he or she knew that? That's incredible. How was that convincing Hemsworth?
He was up for it.
Hemsworth's up for everything.
It was amazing.
He likes to
timing,
take risks. Yeah,
he had when we first talked to him about this was before the script was ready, but we called him to sort of pitch the character arc, and he was either still finishing Ragnarok or had just finished it. I can't remember, but he was so energized by the work that he had done with Taika in that movie in terms of coming up with a more comedic and irreverent Thor.
And we were like, wait till you hear what we've got for you.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, part of our, like, Joe and I love subversion, and for to take the god who looks like a god and sort of find a way to,
and looks like Chris Hemsworth.
Subvert that and sort of reinvent the character. And look, we find Fat Thor as inspiring as any version of Thor. For sure, because he's so relatable, and he's so it's just a very human version of the character.
Yeah.
How was it getting everyone together for that one shot at Tony Stark's funeral? Pretty epic shot you guys got.
That was insane, and we took a photo actually of the base camp from that day, and we've never seen anything like it. I mean, it looked like a military operation, and you had every movie star, Oscar winners. And we knew that we were going to get them all together for one day, so we actually rehearsed that shot the entire day before we shot it with stand-ins, so that the crew was ready. Because you're only going to get a group like that to stand still for about 2 hours before they get restless. So
I'm impressed you got 2 hours.
Yeah. So I think we probably did 10 takes, and maybe use like take 4.
But it was an interesting day because getting all those actors together on one level is very celebratory and joyful, but it's like it was for a difficult reason in the scene, and also the story point that was happening in the scene was one of the biggest secrets in the movie. So we had to be very, very quiet about it.
We would call that on the call sheet the wedding. Right, for people, so that there was a misdirect.
Nobody ever used the word funeral. It was always wedding.
90% of those actors showed up and they had no idea what they were doing. They thought they were there for the wedding. So we had to, just tell them, all right, here's what's happening in the story. Because again, we're just trying to protect information. If people don't have information, it makes it easier for them to not spill the beans accidentally.
Well, what about in terms of protecting information? Because one of the really fun things about this movie that I loved, I have to imagine it was a gas for you guys, is you're basically creating deleted scenes from all these other Marvel movies where they're going back in time to these events. So what was it like, just the joy of staging those and then protecting those secrets as well?
Yeah, I mean, we love staging those scenes. It's part of the fun of it. Is like we like to deconstruct things. That's what's compelling to us. It's interesting. We came into the Marvel universe at the right time when deconstruction was required, and they had built up all these characters, and then we get Cap in his second film and we start picking him apart a little bit. He 7 years later he's a completely different character. So
then we start picking the Avengers apart with Civil War, etc.
And then we killed half the characters, and so we like pulling things apart and then seeing what happens. And I think being able to revisit those scenes from a different perspective felt highly entertaining to us. And you could Quill, you could see the perspective on clearly the energy of that dance sequence that opens the film is in his own mind, and that the truth of it is somebody singing off key to their Walkman.
Or Tony having a new perspective on Cap's old outfit, in Avengers 1 or whatever.
Or Cap running into a younger version of himself, which is a lot squarer than the current version of himself. So, we felt like we could have a lot of fun revisiting old scenes.
What about setting things up going forward? Because of course, I mean, and even though who knows when and what and how, but how many points did you kind of have to hit should this happen in the future? Even things like Thor being on with Guardians, or
none.
Any number of things.
Yeah.
None. I mean,
that's the great thing. I mean, that's why we've made 4 movies at Marvel, to be honest with you. Kevin Feige has this amazing ability to take it one movie at a time, and he wants to give every movie the freedom to become whatever it wants to be on a creative level, and because he knows that's the way you keep things fresh and surprising. You don't want to be thinking too many moves down the chessboard,
because if you blow this movie, there's not going to be another movie, So at the end of the day, what's refreshing and what we've loved about the collaboration with all the other directors is you're just handing the baton off to each other. We're handing a baton off to
who knows what
James, where
do.
Thor's on a ship with the Guardians at the end of the movie, and we don't know whether Gamora is alive or dead.
And he can do anything he wants.
Do anything he wants with
that
those story
points.
points.
Well, we'll end the interview by asking you about how you end the movie, because the movie ends and I'm sitting in the theater and a bunch of people are still sitting in the theater and they're waiting and obviously a conscious decision on your guys' part to not give a post-credit scene. There's a post-credit sound, but there's not a post-credit scene. Tell us about the decisions to do that and what the statement you're making.
Post-credit scenes are connective tissue between the movies, right? There is no connective tissue from this movie going forward.
Yeah,
this is an ending.
A commitment to the finality of this arc of the story.
We called it Endgame for a reason.
And is that sound the Iron Man being built?
It is. It's an homage to the character.
Yeah, it was a very late idea that Kevin Feige had and that we threw in there at the end, which is, I think, really appropriate.
So it's definitely an homage to Iron Man, not another Iron Man suit being built perhaps by someone younger.
It's just literally like wrapping wrapping the story up at the end. It's just like that.
At least for
sound.
now, that's what it was a reference to.
Guys, it's an incredible journey that you guys have been on throughout 4 films, and that we were able to experience on the screen multiple times, a lot of us. Thanks so much for coming to talk about it and chat about the film Avengers Endgame. It's absolutely incredible, and thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks
for
for
having
really
us.
fun.
Really appreciate it.